Welcome to Club E. Hi, I'm Rick Brimacombe of Brimacombe and Associates. I am your architect of business growth and will work with you to unlock your potential and amplify the scale of your company. Today, we're talking about making better people decisions. I want to thank our sponsors, Irish Titan, an e-commerce and web development firm, Highland Bank, a locally owned community bank, Romaine Berg, a digital marketing agency, Schwegman, Lumberg, Woosner, an intellectual property law firm, and Voyager U, a platform to build your independent work life. To participate in the comments section today, you must be in YouTube, and you can submit your questions there. So if you'd like to connect with Mark and I while we're going through the session today, please submit your questions into the YouTube comments field. Also, while you're there, if you don't mind, hit the subscribe button and hopefully even the like button as well. And then just a reminder, you can catch Club E on your favorite podcast platform as well. All right, Mark Klingsheim, managing partner of SIMA Partners, an executive search firm, is our guest today. Welcome, Mark.
Thanks, Rick. Appreciate it. Good to be with you.
And then for those of you in YouTube, you can see Mark's email in the comments field. If you're not there and you have a pen handy, MKLINGS Heim, HEIM at SIMA, and that's spelled SIMA partners.com. Again, that's also in the comments field of YouTube. All right, Mark, tell us a little bit about yourself, your firm, various activities that you're up to.
Sure. Yeah, so I have been in executive search for over 20 years now, and have met my wife in Minnesota, lived in Iowa during my growing up years. And so I said we compromised and we live in Minnesota. So that's for all those Iowans. I grew up in cyclone country, so in Ames, but have three daughters and 5 grandsons, another one on the way today, and possibly, and a granddaughter who broke the streak recently. So a lot of activity in our home. But have worked in large firms, worked with Korn Ferry for several years, ran their advanced technology practice for one of their divisions, and have been in mid-size search firms and started my own firm a number of years ago, and enjoyed doing executive search for corporations as well as some nonprofits.
So if you get the call and you cut us short, we'll know what's going on, correct?
Yeah, right. Yeah, so I think my wife has it covered today. So yeah, she spent the night over at their house last night. So we thought it was last night. So it's exciting times.
All right, well, good luck with that. And it sounds like you're an old pro, and hopefully everything will go well. Certainly we'll be thinking of you, and hopefully you can make it through the next hour. If not, we certainly will not hold it against you, and you run if you need to do that. All right, so 20 plus years in an industry says something about your personal satisfaction with doing it. Talks a little bit about you self-actualizing along this work journey. Talk a little bit about what led you to this line of work and why you like it so much.
Yeah, so I've always been a student of leadership. Even as a kid, I was very fascinated with what people did for their living, and probably more so than most kids. So my parents' their running joke was, "Mark, what do you want to be this week?" And I would study kind of their careers and what they did, and so that was kind of part of my DNA, and continued to have an interest in that throughout my life. But went through a time as far as of taking a look at possibilities. And I had a friend that was in the search business and talked to him. He said, I think you would be really good at executive search. So that kind of piqued my interest, found out more about it, was definitely intrigued. And it's been a perfect fit kind of for my background. But, I think some of the issues that I see is kind of a lack of leadership in a lot of organizations. And, there's a number of things, and a quote that sits on my desk and is pretty much throughout my career has sat here. It's one from Peter Drucker. It says, of all the decisions an executive makes, none is as important as decisions about people, because they determine the performance capacity of your organization. And I think that's true of every organization, whether you're a nonprofit or for-profit. If you're a small company or a large company, you need leadership and across the board. And I think one of the things that's kind of I've struggled with, and I think it's true today. I think Drucker also said in that article that about a third of the hires are effective, a third are minimally effective, and a third of those people fail. And there have been a number of studies that have been done which indicate, depending on which study you want to believe, 40 to 60% of senior executives fail within 18 months of being on the job. And I know one of the large search firms did a survey of 20,000 searches that they went through, and they found that 40% of the leaders, senior leaders, were either pushed out, failed, or quit within 18 months. And I don't think that's a good statistic to have. And I think there's some things that we can do as far as to be better at kind of our process. And I guess one of the things that you asked about some of my other things that I do, I've got a podcast that I do and interview leaders each week. It's called Motivated to Lead. And Rick, you were episode 38. And so we had you come on, but after having, this is our 88th episode coming out this week, interviewing senior leaders. And one of the things that kind of comes over and over again in their conversations is the importance of putting the right teams in place and getting the right people. And part of it is getting people that might be in your organization that might be in the wrong seat. Collins talks about getting the right people on the bus, but it's also getting the right people in the right seats on the bus and making sure that you have your team at optimal, doing their best and that they're motivated in their work. And I think that's definitely important. So that's kind of a little bit of my background and interest in my my career track.
Yeah, so a couple of follow-up questions. First one, which is kill two birds with one stone, both good for me and for you. Tell folks where they can find your podcast, given that I was interviewee number 38. So how can folks find you out in the ether?
Yeah. So if you have an Apple phone, you can go to your podcast app and look up Motivated to Lead, and you'll find it there. Or an Android, Google Podcasts, or Spotify, a number of other channels. We also have a YouTube channel, and then you can go to motivatedtolead.com, and that has a list of all of our guests and old episodes, and you can take a look there.
And then question, after you left the large recruiting firm to start your own, what was the impetus for that?
Yeah, so I think one of the challenges with large firms, they definitely have advantages, and if I were going to do a search internationally, I would definitely pick up the phone and call one of those large firms. There's a lot of great partners in those firms. One of the challenges, the larger the firm is that you tend to get blocked out of being able to recruit. You can't recruit out of, we're a retained firm, so we don't recruit out of clients. And that universe gets pretty small as far as your capacity to get at some of those candidates. And so that was one of the reasons. And I think one of the things that we kind of pride ourselves in is that we, as the senior partners in the firm, that we do the work. And sometimes in larger firms, that gets passed down to other members of the team. And we're definitely very involved in every aspect of the search. And I enjoy that part of it, and the ability to give kind of personal attention to each client that we bring on. We don't have to have a huge firm in order to do great work, and we do work nationally. We do work with, and we don't do any international work at this point unless somebody's looking for somebody from the U.S. to go run a division in another part of the world. So, but that was kind of my part of it, and enjoying both. And the years were at Korn Ferry were great because I got to see kind of how the large firms operate and some of their best practices.
Reminder to everybody that if you want to submit questions to Mark and I, just go in the comments field of YouTube. Also, while you're there, or any of the other platforms that you're listening, hit the subscribe and hopefully the like button. We'd love to have you part of the Club E community going forward. Mark and I spent a little bit of time developing some questions, which we will get to, but I want to just ask one question first before we dive into the stuff that we've already talked about. But you put out some pretty, I don't know if they're scary numbers or disturbing numbers or disappointing or whatever, with all these folks failing in their position or leaving their firms. If there were kind of one or two key reasons, what do you think those would be?
Yeah, I think, and sometimes the failures are not, they're people that maybe get into a position and something changes internally, or it could be a quiet failure where, somebody just leaves, they get a better opportunity. But I think a lot of it is around, it's not the hard skills. You can identify if somebody, say a CFO, you know that they have the skill set to do that work. But I think it's either a problem as far as with culture, people that they're working with as far as fit within the internal team. And a lot of times, and we'll probably talk a little bit more about this later, but it's the person that they're working with closest, and maybe not a great fit as far as with the personality there. So I think that's a lot of it. I don't find that most people leave for just compensation. It typically could be a part of it, but I would say that a lot of times it's other reasons. And if it's somebody being asked to leave, it's normally the soft skills that is what is the issue. So that's what we found.
All right. So, and then in terms of the hiring process, if people don't miss very often on the hard skills side, what would you say are some of the most common mistakes business leaders make throughout the hiring process?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is clarity, not having clarity of what it is that you need to have done as far as in a role. Uh, I've had times where we've met with a board, or we've met with the hiring manager, whether it's a CEO or a senior executive in a team, and sometimes they'll bring out kind of almost, I refer to it as the laundry list of qualifications of things this person needs to have, experience, background, but it really doesn't describe exactly what it is, what are the top things this person needs to do to be successful in the role. And I think that's a problem, because if you don't have clarity yourself, it's going to be hard to find somebody. And if you're working as a team to try to find somebody, you're not going to be on the same page. So I think that's probably the number one thing that I see, if there's not a consensus or clarity on that from the client side, it's going to be hard also to attract people to a position. I think the other thing is that, and sometimes this happens at whatever level, is that people tend to like to hire people like themselves. And I think there could be an issue with that, because we all have biases and things that we're not even aware of. But that can be snap decisions people make about someone. And it's, if you've ever met somebody and they reminded you of somebody you either liked or didn't like in your past, and sometimes you don't realize you're projecting that on them, you make a quick decision, and sometimes that's not always the best decision to make. So I think it's important to have people, others that are involved in the process. And I know you have a lot of entrepreneurs that are probably starting companies or in the process of building on their team. And sometimes you don't have a large group that's working together to hire. But I would say, even for somebody that doesn't have really, you're kind of in your starting stage, get an outside advisor to meet with. If it's a key hire, you might want to get somebody else's input as you're going through the process. I would say just winging it in your interview process is not a good idea. You need to have a roadmap and need to have a process that's detailed. It leads to a better process, and it also, I think it helps candidates too, as far as to know that there is a process and a roadmap that they're going to go through as far as for the hiring. So I think those are just a few things that I think would be some things that you would need to address and make sure that you cover.
Sure. So I don't know that I will necessarily throw the crystal ball question at you in today's session. I do that a lot. But another way that I ask questions would be kind of the magic wand. So let's say you are the czar of all hiring throughout the business community, and you had a magic wand and could change the hiring process in any way that you want. What would be one or two things that you might change up the hiring process just so that it would be more effective both for the companies as well as the candidates?
Yeah, I think a part of what we do, and we're our firm is, and kind of what attracted me originally to SIMA. I had known of the organization for a number of years before I actually joined them. But one thing that we do is we do assessment, have an assessment tool that looks at kind of how somebody's wired, how they're going to perform within a role, fit for the role. And I guess that's the thing that drew me to the organization in the beginning, is that we have a process that kind of helps figure out, is this a good fit? Because I think interviews, some people are better at interviewing and getting kind of the essence of who somebody is, but a lot of times people can show up really well in an interview, and then they actually get in the role and they're not who you thought they were. I heard an old story, and I don't know if this is true, but the guy said he was frustrated with one of his employees, and he said, finally in frustration, he said, I hired your resume and what I got was you. And I think that's kind of a sad commentary, but I think unless we understand, I think some people say I work for my gut, and that's kind of how I hire. Well, I think if you can have some other data points that can help you figure out, how this person, and it's not just for your organization good, but it's also for the candidate. If they get into a role, it's not a good thing if it's not a good fit for them, and if you can help that process get better. And so that would be my number one thing is, whatever tool you use, but have something else that you're using to help make those decisions. We also use a tool, EQI, which measures emotional intelligence, which I think is one of the big factors for fit and whether somebody will work within an organization. We all have gaps in that, motivation stays constant, but EQI can change, and you can develop as a leader in your emotional intelligence. That's something you can grow in. But if there's some gaps that you can see that there's going to be some potential issues in advance, and as you're kind of taking a look at candidates, I think it's important to have that bigger picture.
Yeah, that emotional quotient, people's ability to connect with others and be empathetic and thoughtful and get along with a broader group. So that is a powerful thing, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think there's, a lot of people know the motivation part of it is not a surprise. When I take candidates through the process, they're not surprised by it. But what they say to me is, it finally gives me some language to describe actually what I've known about myself. And I say, well, the true test is bring it home to your spouse and have them take a look at it. And if they validate it, it's accurate. But on the emotional intelligence side of things, that, I think people, if they don't realize where it is that they are lacking, and they don't know where they can improve and can build and can get some help, whether it's outside coaching that they maybe need, we don't know where to start unless we know, kind of identify it.
So we can't have a conversation without talking about COVID, at least not these days. How has COVID impacted the hiring dynamic, and has it changed any since COVID? For example, are we still seeing it that it is an employee market, or are we more in an employer's market?
Yeah, looking at the numbers, I think before COVID, we were at 3.8, right around there, unemployment. And I think at the height in May, we were like over 14% unemployment. And I think the last numbers I've seen is 6.3 in January 2021. So I think there's definitely been a shift from an employee market to an employer's very rapidly, because we typically see, if you look back at the Great Recession, you saw that it was kind of over a little bit longer period of time. But this was shutting down, the entire economy, which was, very healthy and strong. But I think there's still, I would say it's an employer's market. There are a lot of people that have gotten, their jobs have been eliminated, and especially some hard hit markets, and that people that have never looked for an opportunity. I know I've talked to executives who've said, throughout my entire career, 20 plus year career, I've never had to look for a job. I've always had opportunities, and they've sought me out. So I think there's some opportunity here for organizations to take advantage of it. I think in 2008, some of the companies that are in existence and doing incredibly well right now weren't even on the radar at that point, and have grown as a result. They took advantage of kind of a downturn in order to build their team and to get, the right people in place. So it's kind of a mixed bag. And also, depending, again, is the industry you're in. I've talked to some CEOs in the last couple of weeks that said, last year was their best year ever, but they were in a specific market that actually tended to benefit from, all that's gone on. So I see that things are starting to move up, and hopefully they continue to do that. So I think, it's definitely, I tend to be more of a contrarian view, that when everybody else is laying off, is also opportunity for companies to take advantage and to bring some great people on board.
Yeah, at Bromocamp Company, which we've rebranded as Akoya Go, one of the Bromocomb Capital portfolio companies, we definitely have been aggressive with bringing people in over the last half a year or so, looking for those opportunities. So agree with you 100%, Mark. So let's say a company is going to go out to market to do a search. Before they pull the trigger on doing that, what questions should they ask themselves before starting that process?
Yeah, I think one of the questions you need to ask is there somebody internally? Now, you probably have already gone through that, and it seems like a silly question to ask, but I think you do need to look at, is there somebody that maybe is at the point where they could move up into this new role? Sometimes we always look outside and go, we need to bring somebody, external in, but I would say you got to start there. And if you're uncertain, we've had a number of times where we've had organizations say, you know what, we think we have the person inside, but we're not sure. So we want this person to be considered as a part of the process, as far as in comparison to other, candidates. So I would say do that. And I think that's only fair to people that, and sometimes you'll have people that will apply for a position that, they're not the person. But if it's handled well, and they're given the same consideration, and that they go through the process, and they're treated, with respect through the thing, and given the same opportunity to everybody else, I think you'll have people that will, if you want those people to stay in the organization, that you handle it well, they'll be kind of honored to be considered for that. So that's one thing. I think, understanding who's going to be part of the process. I talked a little bit about putting a roadmap together. Who's going to be part of the interview process? Who should be a part of it? You don't want such a large group that becomes cumbersome and hard for the candidate to get through the interviews. But I say, you're better off taking time to put that process and people, and that they're all on the same page. Again, going back to that clarity of what the position is about. And so if they get them in a room, figure out what are the top things that this person needs to have. I think that's something that you need to take a look at. And then asking that big question: what does the person need to do? What's success going to look like? And you need to have that. Whether you do the search yourself or hire somebody else to help you with that, I think you need to get at the front end of the process, make sure that you do it. And is this job, I guess the other part is this job realistic the way we've set it up? Or is it, sometimes people put together, again, this laundry list, and nobody is going to ever even be close to what you're looking for. So is this person actually exist out there that you're looking for, because no matter what your target is, nobody's going to be 100%. If you can get an 80% coverage of the target, that's a pretty successful hire, and you can fill in the other gaps around it.
Yeah, that's a proverbial unicorn.
Yep.
So somebody's out there looking for that unicorn. The reality is it just doesn't exist.
Right. Absolutely.
What about, again, going back to where we started, you said, hey, a lot of the people decisions didn't work out. Talk a little bit about the process that can help companies make better people decisions.
Yeah, I think one of the things we do when we start the process is we, again, coming down to figure out what are the critical leadership requirements. And those are typically 3, 4, 5 things that this person is needing to accomplish. And I think the other part of it, you can't take, and I think a lot of organizations miss this, is what is the context? What is our current reality? If you're a startup, you're a position that could have the same title at a startup versus a mid-size or a large company, but it's going to be a completely different position. So are you a startup, or you're at that point where you need, for example, a CFO, and you're going to do an IPO eventually? That's a completely different skill set and experience that you need. So you realize, or maybe it's a turnaround situation, you're going to need somebody with that background. But whatever stage you are as a company, make sure you understand that context and then hire to that too. That needs to be a consideration. We had an organization that we did a search for a couple of years ago, and they had a leader that was in the organization for 40 years. And I don't know if I'd ever done a search where somebody had been in a position that long. It has to be in the top, 2 or 3 that I've done. So nobody in the organization knew more about the organization than this person. And that was one of the problems the board had, is they thought, if something happens, the proverbial bus, hits this person, we've lost all this information and it hasn't been passed down. There was no succession plan. And it had grown from just a one location, small organization to a multi-site, large organization, very complex. And so they had to have a different type of leader in that next role. And there wasn't really, when we gathered everybody we did a 360, what type of leader do you need to have for the next 10 years? And there wasn't a consensus. And we had to go through a fairly lengthy process as far as making sure that they understood exactly what it was that they needed. And so we finally got that and was able to make that transition. But I think, whether you're in an organization that is maybe hiring your first role or position, you're putting that first team together, you need to think through, kind of where you're at, what are your needs, what is the person's capabilities, their competencies. And I think the other piece of it that is important is, what is the culture of your company? I think there's definitely can be a misfit as far as around culture. And there's been a lot said about culture in the last number of years. There's the statement that culture eats strategy every time. One of the comments has been made. But what is, and culture seems to be kind of a squishy term. But Patrick Lencioni wrote, he's written a number of books, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, and a number of different books. But he talks about culture quite a bit. And one of the things he said is, you need to discover what is true about your culture, not what you're aspiring to be as a company or an organization, but what's true about your culture. What are the values? What are the top 2, 3 things that's important for you as an organization? And you better make sure that those people can buy into those values. Otherwise, you're going to disrupt the culture. And especially in a small organization, I always say, in a large organization, you can make a hire and it's not going to have a huge impact. But in a small organization, one person can definitely shift a culture, and you make sure that you have that in mind also. One of the, I borrowed this diagram, and this is very low tech here, but it's, if you can see that, this is a Gary Swart, we just interviewed recently, has come up with this, and I thought it was just, it's a simple diagram, but it talks about, as far as just the areas that you need to pay attention to as far as you're hiring, and he talks about the characteristics that are needed. And Gary is a partner at Polaris Partners, Silicon Valley VC firm. He was CEO of Odesk, which is now Upworks. And he talks about the personal characteristics that you need to look for: integrity, intelligence, which is not only IQ but EQ, judgment, passion, somebody who's a strong communicator, initiative, energy. Those are things that you need to be, as you assess candidates, I think it's important. He has that motivation piece kind of in the middle. And again, that's sometimes hard to judge, but I think it is how somebody's wired. It's how they're going to work most effectively. How are they going to work with others? Then he talks about skills, again, hard skills, and part of it can be also the soft skills, and then their knowledge, their background, their experience. And I thought that was just a nice little diagram that kind of helps kind of figure out what quadrants. And I encourage people, if you're doing a lot of interviewing, one of the things that I get as a part of feedback from candidates is when they go into a company to interview and they feel like there was no thought put into the interview process. People are asking me the same question over and over again, and it feels like people are interviewing me, but they're not really coordinated with the other people that are also interviewing me. So I think if you can have something as a kind of a guideline, again, the roadmap, it's going to be a lot better process and more enjoyable for the candidate. And one thing I would encourage people is realize that, and I think a lot of people forget this, is that when you're going out to find somebody, how they're treated, whether they are selected or not, comes back to the community and people. If they have a bad experience with an organization, that person it's like anything else. If it's a negative experience, they're going to talk about it a lot more than they would a positive. So I would encourage you, just because that's your brand out in the marketplace, make sure people are treated well and that they're followed up with. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as far as employees. But the thing that I think aggravates people is if they never hear back from an organization once they've interviewed, and if they're not selected, they need to know that too. And you might not be able to provide them the exact reason, but I think they always appreciate that follow-up.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more. So let's pretend a company goes through this process. They listen to some of your tips. They run a good process. Now they're getting towards the finish line. What steps should business owners, business leaders, and companies make before they go to that final hiring decision?
Yeah, and this would be advice that I would give probably pre-COVID, and I'm not sure exactly how this is handled today. You might have to get creative, but I think there is a tendency to in an interview setting is that everybody is stiff and they feel this is kind of the question and answer, and some people are better again at getting asking questions and getting replies. But I think if you can possibly do it in a different setting, and again, I don't have the magic wand right now because this is unusual, but I've found that in the past, if you can get people out of an office or somewhere else, that people tend to be a little bit more relaxed versus in a formal office. But most of the interviews are being done like this, so it's a little bit harder to get a read too. As I mentioned earlier, I think getting others' viewpoint, I think debriefing as you're doing the final interviews. Sometimes I will sit in with either a board or with the people that are making the decision, and if they need help as far as kind of debriefing and going through what are the reasons. Are you using valid points and data information you gather to make the best decision. And just because you like somebody doesn't mean they're the right person for that role. You need to make sure that they're a good fit all around. And getting that other feedback, I think, is so important. If there's red flags that show up in the process, you need to address those red flags. There might be, a good reason for that. There might be just a lack of information that you need. But if there's something that is that you're sensing needs to be addressed, and again, that can go back to even the kind of the final steps of referencing, is that you can go through and get additional, data points from, former bosses or coworkers or people that are there. And a lot of times, soft referencing, if you know people in the industry or people that have worked with them, I think that's important. Nobody puts typically I've had one time where I had somebody give me a reference that was not a real positive reference, which I was surprised. I'd never had that happen before, but evidently they didn't know who they had put on the list or how they felt. But I typically look for tone when I do referencing. It's not so much the information that they share, but it's the tone, it's the enthusiasm that they have for the individual. And that question, would you, if given the opportunity, would you work with this person again? And if they, are enthusiastic about that, it definitely says a lot about a person. I would say use some tools if you can in assessing just in that kind of we do finalist candidates. And I love the line by Coach Wooden, who said, "Be quick, but don't hurry." So don't get through that final stage and just kind of rush through it, but make sure that you go through every step and make sure that you do your due diligence. And it's a lot better to do that on the front end and get to the end and go, you know what, we don't have the person that we need, and you're better off doing that than moving forward if there's some major questions. So hopefully you've got two or three finalists that you have a good choice, and it's just a hard decision to make regarding that finalist.
Yeah, that term used, soft reference. I had always used the term blind, but I had just made that up myself, of always just calling people that I had in my network
Right.
that somehow had a tie to this particular person. And so, yeah, I couldn't agree with you more that you're going to get almost universally positive feedback unless you start doing kind of your own digging and your own due diligence. So.
Yeah. Yeah. And typically, and I would also, the thing that I've found that on background checks, and a lot of times if there's a education verification, I've had instances where somebody, if they are going to fib on their or lie, but worst, on their resume, it's typically around education. And we've had a number of news stories over the years of people in high profile that said they had advanced degrees and didn't. And I actually, when I was with a large firm, I had a candidate went through the whole process, and they had listed on their resume an Ivy League school, and they went through our whole process and went through it and got it clearer. And I thought, that's really strange. And I did a quick Google search and found that there's a 60-minute story on the university that they had listed on their resume. And there was a big story. It looked like an Ivy League school, and in Europe, there wasn't anything there. It was they had paid $60 to get this degree. And I asked the candidate, I said, why did you've had a great career. You've been at some large organizations. Why did you not tell the truth on it? He says, well, actually, 20 years ago, I had it on it, and I've gotten so many jobs, I never took it off. And I said, well, the problem is that it's going to cost as far as this opportunity.
Yep.
So, I think it's one of those things where just to be aware. I mean, I think it's having caution, but also, at the same point, you don't want to beat up people as far as for, on the, there might be things that come up, but you need to definitely get clarity as far as of who you're hiring.
So reminder to everybody out there, if you'd like to submit a question for Mark and I, you can do that into the comments field of YouTube. Happy to try to weave that in. So again, feel free to reach out if you would like to join our conversation. All right, so now we've hired them. What can companies do to help new hires succeed faster?
I think, and this seems like a no-brainer, but I've had it happen with people, and is that it seems like the first day they show up, it was almost like it was unexpected. They get to the office and their computer isn't set up, or they don't have access to email. They don't have, and I think showing that on the front end, as far as, one of the things I remember of joining an organization is that they had everything just so well laid out. They sent me a a gift to my home before I started, and it was just like, oh, this is a first class organization that is doing something different. And when I got there, it was like they were expecting me, which I've had large company. I was talking to a guy who he does onboarding uh, for large companies around the world, and he said, they had an executive that they had relocated. They had shipped his wine cross country. They had, to get him, settled. But then when he showed up to the office, it was like nobody was even seemed to be aware that he was coming that day. So I think those are things that just are common sense stuff, but sometimes get dropped. So make sure that somebody is responsible for that. I think to have somebody internally that's a sponsor or a guide is so important. Somebody that can be a go-to person for that person to go to with any questions that they might have. There's nothing worse than coming into a new organization and not knowing kind of the lay of the land. And if you can get somebody that can be that point person, that somebody doesn't feel like they're going and bugging, that they have permission to go and ask any question, I think that helps people get up and running quicker. And then somebody it could be that same person, is to help translate your culture and your lingo. Maybe they're coming from a different industry, potentially. But even if they're in the same industry, you have lingo, you have language within your organization that maybe you're the only ones that speak this language, and so you need to have somebody that helps them understand kind of how things work within your organization. And then I think that 90 to 100-day roadmap, I think, is important to talk through, as far as this is kind of where you're at. You don't want to put somebody in an impossible situation at the front end. You don't want to put them into a project where there's a great risk that they're going to fail in that first opportunity. So you want to allow them to ramp up during that time. So I think that's important, and that they kind of have a roadmap for those first 90 days. One organization that I've talked to recently, what they do at the end of that 90 days is they meet with the person and say, okay, what do you need to do as far as to be successful in this role for the coming year. They've given them enough time to get a grasp on kind of the position, the organization, but they're asking the question, what is it that you're going to do? And maybe there needs to be some changes made or some pivots within the role or the organization for this person to be successful, but set them up for success. And I think a lot of times, if you do that, you're going to have a lot better first year, and the person's going to be happy. They're going to want to stay, and they feel like they've been in a good situation. And that communication piece is so important. Is don't just hire them and then your job's done. It's not. It's just starting, and you make sure that you keep in regular communication and checking in with that person. So those are just a few things that I think are helpful, and I think would get somebody off to a quick start. And what might have taken you 6 to 12 months, you can get done in that 90 to 100 days, and so that they can be more effective as far as in that first year.
Love a couple of those ideas. Love the mentor person, and then also the gift idea. Those are great. I jotted a couple of notes down there to do some of that stuff myself. So thanks for sharing those.
Sure.
You touched on earlier, and we talked about some of the main reasons why people leave their jobs. Maybe just briefly touch on that again, but then tie it into what companies could do differently to improve their relationships with their employees, and then thus hopefully increase not only the success of these employees, but also hopefully long term the retention metrics.
Absolutely. Yeah, and the old saying goes that people don't quit companies; they quit their boss. And I think that a lot of times is the case that something is broken down, or there's some either miscommunication or not an understanding of how people work. So I think that that's one of the big things. Back to the previous question, the communication piece is so vital, and it's more than just a quick how are you doing. You've got to be on top of kind of what's going on, and if there's any it's expectations need to be aligned, and if people don't understand what those expectations are, uh, nobody should ever be blindsided uh, by being dismissed from a company. They should know that there's been given opportunity for people, and they know what's expected of them, and so that communication piece through it is I think a reason why a lot of people don't do well, or they don't flourish within a role. And I think that the whole people want to feel like there's purpose in what they do. I think they need to sense that when they don't feel like that what they do matters within the organization and has no impact. I think that's one of the other things that I think really gives people reason to look elsewhere. And it's getting the call from somebody like me who if somebody is fulfilled, and I actually like to hear from people saying, you know what, I love my job. There's no way that you could possibly get me out of this organization. I think, okay, that's a good organization. That's a healthy culture. But there are some people that just don't feel like their work matters. And so I think if you can shore that up, I think that will help. So I think as far as retention rates, again, I think it's especially during this time, during a trying time. Again, that over communication piece of it is so important. We had a guest on just recently, and they were doing town hall meetings throughout COVID. And he said one of the things that they wanted to make sure is that people felt like they were being communicated with in an honest way, and that they understood what was going on within the company. Because I think people get nervous during this time because they're afraid that they're going to lose their position, and they've seen friends of theirs and other people impacted. So I think keeping that communication line open. Somebody gave me this idea recently, another podcast guest who said that a good way to do it, and this is a cheap way that everybody can do, is they say take an appreciation letter and make it a letter of commendation. And how you do that is you type up the reason that you appreciate the person's work, and you CC a bunch of people within the organization. He said that goes from a letter of appreciation that would just go to one person to a letter of commendation that goes to an entire organization. And he said the amazing thing is people respond to that. They go, oh, I am appreciated. I'm also acknowledged in front of our team or our company or whatever. And I think when people start feeling that, they can go through some tough times and be healthier and feeling good about what they're doing. I think providing opportunities for people. It's not always a raise that's needed, but I think a lot of people are just looking for another opportunity to be a part of an important project, something that maybe is outside of their kind of daily routine, and saying, you know what, I've seen your work, I appreciate it, and I think you would be great to help us with this other additional responsibility or project. And I think that growth opportunity is going to keep people within the organization interested. It's nothing worse than being bored with your work and feeling like there's nothing new about kind of what you're doing. So I think those are some things that you can do. So compensate. Dollars are important to most people. Compensation is important, but it also can come out, time off, flexibility. I mean, we're a lot more flexible, and employers are a lot more flexible now, people working from home, than they were previous. So I think there is more opportunity for people to help out as far as kind of with that flexibility for who they hire. So there's are a few ideas as far as in retention that I think could be helpful. And again, people being valued is probably the greatest retention.
Yeah, that couldn't agree with those more. Those were very good ideas. Thanks for sharing. I would imagine you've seen a bunch of interesting things over the 20 plus years you've been doing the recruiting. Interesting in that reasons why people have left, reasons why they would be interested in leaving something that maybe they're very satisfied with for something new. Anyway, was there a lesson along the way that you wish you would have learned sooner?
Yeah, I think the whole idea of and I've managed some pretty large teams over the years and spread out all over. And I wish I would have known about I guess first off my own motivation, what makes me tick, what my wiring and how I work best with others, and what it is that. And again, I think everybody knows it about themselves, but again, having language around that. And then understanding that not everybody's like me. What I consider to be drudgery, somebody else absolutely loves that kind of work. And I think when you're looking at a team, I think if we're looking through a lens, our own lens, we don't realize that getting people in positions where they feel like I'm doing something, I don't have to motivate them, they're self-motivated, is so much better. I worked with somebody a number of years ago that loved Excel, and I hated putting together Excel sheets, but she absolutely loved it, and she'd be energized by doing Excel, and she was an amazing person at it. She could, what would take me a day to do, she would do in probably 20 minutes. And I'm thinking, okay, there's an example. If I'm managing people, I better understand as far as how they're motivated, how they're wired, where I need to put them, and help them succeed. And if I can help them succeed, the whole organization is going to succeed. So those are some that going back to a previous thing, and I think it is important for people to understand that, and then they're going to be much happier, and your job's going to be easier. So that's, I guess, the other side of it.
All right. So we are almost to the finish line here. So it looks like we're going to get through our interview without you getting the call on the family front and having to run
Right.
to make the arrival of another grandchild. Anyway, thanks for being here today and spending your time with us, Mark. Appreciate it very much. As you look at our conversation today, is there one kind of key takeaway that you would like our audience to bring with them afterwards?
Yeah, I think it's just having thinking about your hiring process more as an ongoing process that you take people through. Don't take shortcuts. Make sure that you're going through every step in your process, and I think you're going to have a lot better results, and your organization will do much better. And I think that just that final statement from Drucker, of all the decisions the executive makes, none as important as the decisions about people, because they determines the performance capacity of the organization. And he added at the end of it, therefore, I'd better make these decisions well. And that's why I would encourage people to do is your organization's going to succeed and thrive as you hire great talent and keep people in the right positions, and to make sure that you manage each person as an individual.
Great. Good advice for everybody. Mark, thanks for spending your time with us today. Again, it's Mark Klingsheim of SIMA Partners. Mark, how can folks get a hold of you if they'd like to reach out?
Yeah. So my email is as you said, mklingsheim@SIMA Partners. That's a great one. And then you can also feel free to give me a call. Reach out on LinkedIn is a great place. And if I've already had somebody reach out to me this morning, wasn't able to be with us today, they would like to have a conversation about their career or new venture, and so I'd love to have a conversation. If we can be a resource to you, would love to do that.
Yeah, and then a reminder for folks, again, you can listen to Mark's interview on your favorite podcast platform and Club space E on our YouTube channel. And then the website is clube.com. Again, clube.com. Mark, thank you very much. Good luck with the family today, tomorrow, and we look forward to having you back again.
Great. Thanks so much, Rick. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you.